You just completed your term as the chair of Association of International NGOs in Nepal. What is your legacy and what do you think are your main achievements?
Thank you for the question. It was my privilege to serve 114 INGO members who collectively employ about 5,000 development professionals in Nepal. I think looking back on my tenure, I would say that I have about 3 to 5 legacies. I think foremost among them would be the initiation of annual disability job fair, which is now, if that takes place this year in 2014, will be the 3rd iteration. The second is the futsal, AIN futsal, which brought out so many young development workers to play against one another in the futsal arena. I think that was also a good social event. The third would be engagement with Inland Revenue Department, where we sat down with the tax officers and really sorted out how INGOs are supposed to pay taxes and what are the processes, that sort of thing. And the fourth thing would be, engagement with the journalists. Last year, we engaged with journalists at the higher level, at the editors level, basically explaining to them what development is or was at the time. But this year, we actually focused on skill building. So what we did was we invited mid-level reporters and journalists working at various dailies and radio and television, and basically explained to them or interacted with them on how INGOs, how we do our budgets, how we allocate resources for program, overheads, and that sort of thing. So I think engagement with media, engagement with the government, engagement with with the disability sector, as well as having a social event such as futsal. These are 4 broad legacy areas that I would consider that I'm leaving behind at AIN.
Despite all these efforts that AIN has been putting, as you said, there has been quite a lot of criticism in the media about INGOs. Why do you think it's happening at this time, and how is AIN responding? Or how has AIN responded to these criticisms?
Initially, we were quite surprised by the level of criticism, but once we started digging deep into it, we found out that much of the criticism was actually coming because of misunderstanding and misperception. For example, most journalists thought that all development agencies were INGOs, which is not the case. For example, UN agencies are not INGOs. World Bank, ADB, DFID, USAID, they are not INGOs. But whenever the media used INGO as a phrase to basically talk about all donors, irrespective of whether they are actual INGOs or donor agencies, or multilaterals or bilaterals. So once we realized that, that's why we reached out to the media, engaged with them, and really explained the differences among multilaterals, bilaterals, INGOs, and so forth. And then we made our claims very clear in the sense that we do not do broad-scale, large-scale development work. We do work where there is where government needs assistance and where the market development is not quite clear. So we basically come in to fill in the gaps, providing water sanitation services, providing some literacy classes, offering nutrition programs, that sort of thing. So INGOs, we told the media, are here to fill in the gap in the development sector. And once they understood that, they backed off a little bit more. But then I would say that it was a continuous learning process for us and continuous engagement with the media that we needed to do in the last 2 years, as well as years before, and I'm sure in coming times as well.
There was an assumption, at least when I was in AIN, that the cooperation between Social Welfare Council and AIN was going on pretty well. But surprisingly, there has been criticism from SWC as well of late. Why do you think that's happened?
Well, I think, quite frankly, when the highest levels of government officers, when they criticized development assistance in general, we think that that provided a template for all people associated with the government to go on the defensive, or rather on the offensive, against INGOs and development agencies in general. But I see this as, ups and downs of doing development work in Nepal. Government in public may criticize us, but in private, we know that we work very closely with the government, with the Ministry of Women, with the Ministry of Finance, with the Ministry of Education, Health, and so forth. So I would say that that's a little bit of price that we pay, taking punches from time to time for doing development work. But by and large, I would say that the relationship is not as bad as what has been portrayed.
And there has been this aid monitoring platform set up by the Ministry of Finance, and actually many AIN members took part in the training provided by them. I think once you said that there are many information required which were actually not needed. There are too many details that they were asking for. Can you specify on the challenges the AIN members have faced in kind of?
First of all, I think our first point was, in general, all our information should be collected by one body, that is the Social Welfare Council. We really recognize Social Welfare Council as the one window or one door for us to put in all our information. And in this particular case, I think because Social Welfare Council could not do that, or could not do that very well, another government's ministry came into the place, Ministry of Finance. So we sort of agreed with the Ministry of Finance. So in addition to submitting our reports to SWC, we also started submitting our report, or rather fill in the data on the AID monitoring platform. And around 92 INGOs have completed training, as well as many have submitted their details. The point is, in Nepal, whenever there is the data collection work, the amount of information required is so detailed. For example, salaries of different people, and also headings. For example, in accounting, not all organizations book the expenses under the same heading. Sometimes, the headings can be quite different, and people who go in to fill in the AMP might get confused as to, here is the money, but where does it belong on the AMP detailed portal? So that sort of confusion came up, and our understanding has been, as long as the Ministry of Finance knows, for example, Water Aid or Save the Children has brought in X amount of money and broadly spends it on, literacy, forestry, livelihood, what have you, and the total comes out to be correct, that's all it needs to know, really. It doesn't have to go into the kind of details that confuses those who start filling in the details. So those have been our pleas to the ministry, and they've taken this into account. And I think if the AID monitoring platform is made more user-friendly, that would definitely allow more INGOs to come in and fill in the details all the more.
One of the main criticisms against INGOs has been that they have been accessing, or at least trying to access, funds that are meant for local NGOs in Nepal. And actually, there have been cases where at least INGOs have been trying to access that fund. How appropriate do you think that is?
I think, speaking as the ex-chair of AIN, I would say that that is normally not the practice. That's one. The two is that, but the competition has gotten to such an extent that now INGOs or NGOs are competing for funds all over the world. Different consortiums have been formed, consortiums compete for funds, that sort of thing. But I would say that, this should be taken more at the individual level, individual INGOs level, than at the, AIN level, because at AIN, we do not condone such practices. But at the same time, we recognize our limit, that we are not a policing body, we are not an investigating body. So because of that, there might be some lack of policing on our side, but then that is not really our job. This is where SWC and other.
Is the existing mechanism of the government that is there ideal or supportive to the work of INGOs, or would INGOs prefer a different kind of modality in which they work or interact with the government?
We've looked at other countries. Other countries, what they have is, they have something like a charity commission, which is the equivalent of Social Welfare Council, and INGOs or NGOs, for that matter, report all their findings, their work, their reports of progress, what have you, to that particular charity commission. In Nepal, the difficulty is that nobody takes SWC seriously within the broader government system, and because SWC is not taken seriously, that poses a lot of problems for INGOs. And we are called by the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Home, Ministry of Education. So we spend an enormous amount of time running from pillar to post, explaining what we do, who we do it, with how much funds, and so forth. In our view, all these extra diversions should not have come to us in the first place. We should have just dealt with SWC, really our regulator. For example, in the commercial sector, all the commercial banks, for example, report to the Rashtra Bank, basically. They don't, go to Ministry of Finance, Ministry of National Planning Commission, and the rest, because they go to the regulator. Likewise, in the non-profit sector, if we could also go to our one window, one door SWC, and really submit everything to SWC, then the SWC needs to be the spokesperson for us. within the government mechanism. If we have done something wrong, fine, punish us. But then once you are a regulator, then you defend us, you protect us, you give us regulations, you give us rules to follow, which we are more than happy to follow. I think the difficulty in Nepal is that we have SWC, but then we have so many other agencies, and the lines of accountability are not quite clear to us. And when things go really bad, we become the easy punching bags for people to hit against. And that's a very vulnerable position to be in. But at the same time, we haven't taken that negatively. What we've done is, we've gone out our way to mend fences, we've gone out of our way to, build relationships, engage with the media and so forth. What we do is doesn't give us immediate results, but we hope that in the long run, we can explain our work to the people. Because at the grassroots level, people do seem to want INGOs to come and work for development in VDCs, in districts, and so forth.
INGOs claim to have made significant contribution towards the development of this country, towards poverty reduction, but oftentimes they have difficult time in trying to kind of show evidence or concretize their achievements.
I think as long as INGOs are not seen as entities that do big scale work like highways, hydropower companies, building mega structures, we don't do that. Because we don't do that, our efforts are not really quite clear. What we do are three different things really. First, we advise NGOs, monitor their work, and also fund them, and give them a template to work off. For example, how to work on literacy in Thading, or how to work on nutrition in Palpa, so on and so forth. So we do work with NGOs, and because we do work with NGOs, people see NGOs work in the field and not so much as INGOs work, because we are a layer between the donors and NGOs. So that's hidden work, invisible work. That's one. It's like writing a book. People understand who the author is, but then they don't understand who the editor is. The editor is always hidden, basically. So much of our work is editorial in that sense. We do important work, but our work is hidden. So that's one. The second thing is, if you look at this, the Khula Disa Mukta or ODF movement in Nepal, it didn't come only because of INGOs, but INGOs played a critical role in making sure that this was owned and taken forward by NGOs, civil societies, government, and so forth. So also in nutrition, also in schooling, also in the development of girl child and so forth. So all these are social issues that have no clear answers. You cannot say that we've reached our targets, work is finished. These are ongoing work, no. So I would say that if you look at the development progress from 1979 to 1994, I would say that many of these indicators in Nepal have been quite positive, and I think INGOs do deserve a slice of credit for helping Nepal develop in these manners. But then again, these are all small-scale development interventions, not big scale, but small-scale development, literacy, nutrition, education, health, maternal mortality, the lowering of that, and so forth. These are the issues that in the end, help develop Nepal. So these are the second thing. And the third thing would be INGOs bring global civil society values, the equity, justice. For example, many organizations who work on disability issues, they get funding from INGOs. Now, who in Nepal really funds? Not so much government, not so much the private sector, no? Disability issues, Dalit issues, and so forth. So unpopular issues do not get easily funded. And INGOs are in a position to fund unpopular but important issues that they fund. So these are all, I would say that, not necessarily highly visible, dramatic work, but these are important work to make sure that, we put together the fabric of democracy, fabric of civil society to help develop Nepal as a strong, democratic and inclusive country.
One of the key areas of INGO work has been supporting and building the capacity of national or local organizations in Nepal. But if you see today, there are many capable and organizations who have built the capacity as much as many INGOs in Nepal. So in that context, don't you think that the role of INGOs should change?
I think it has changed. I would say that. We see that local organizations have much greater capacity now than they had 10 years ago. And that's good, that's always good, and we encourage such capacity building exercises as well as strong, capable local NGOs or national NGOs for that matter. But I think being capable is one thing, being credible is another thing. No, so I think our focus when we work with local NGOs, we say that yes, let's build capacity, yes, let's be capable, but now our next step is to be credible worldwide. Yeah. So as long as a donor, let's say in Australia or in America, likes what they see in a local NGO, but is not quite sure of the delivery, they may come to INGOs for additional assurance in terms of how the funds will be channeled, how the reports will be written, that sort of thing. But I think it's a matter of evolution. I think in 15 years from now, many of the INGOs will have shrunk their work and moved on to other things, the development issues of the future, rather than clinging on to monitoring, supervising national NGOs who would have become very capable and credible by that time.
So you're suggesting that the national NGOs, national or local NGOs, still have a lot of work to do in terms of portraying themselves as credible organizations?
I think I would say that there are many national NGOs that are quite capable, credible, and they are competing with INGOs in the global arena. Yeah, so that's already there. But their numbers are not as high as one would have hoped by now. So there is still a lot more capacity building, a lot more credibility building work that still needs to be done in Nepal. And even if you look at INGOs, I think many 20 years ago, many of the heads were all expats, but now they are increasingly being replaced by Nepali nationals. No, so that is an improvement. For example, many of the staff are Nepali nationals, very professional, well-educated, well-trained, and so forth. So I see this as a trend that is only accelerating in coming times. So I wouldn't say that INGOs are going to be doing the same work for the next 10 years. They will evolve, and so will the national NGOs. Capacity building, credibility building, will take place all the more. So the more we do that, I think everybody benefits from collaboration.
Nepal is in transition, and the context is changing actually.
Yeah, true.
Because tomorrow Nepal is going to be a federal country. So in this transitional phase, in this changing context, how do you think the INGOs in general and AIN in particular should move ahead, move in the days ahead? What direction it should take?
I think AIN and INGOs should focus on three issues. The first issue is capacity building. No matter how much does the external context change, capable, capacitated groups will always be necessary. So I think AIN and INGOs are well positioned to build capacity for the coming changing times. So that's one. The second thing is, AIN and our members are in a position to advocate universal values, equity, justice. Rights of the marginalized, rights of the poor and the vulnerable, and so forth. So I think these are universal issues. And no matter, again, how much does our external context change, these are the values that INGOs should propagate: transparency, accountability, and so forth. And the third thing is, basically understanding that the government cannot do everything by itself, even local government. The private sector cannot do everything by itself. Donors, again, can only do things up to a point. And there is a small bit of role for INGOs and NGOs to play to bring out unpopular but important issues to the fore, so that people are aware of these issues. These issues get funded one way or the other, and altogether, all these issues will help us. Again, like I said earlier, help make Nepal a democratic and inclusive country that is in tune with the global development framework and also with national development framework. So I would say that INGO's role will not change dramatically, but the emphasis might change depending on the external context. But what INGOs have been doing for the last 30 years, the thrust of that will remain pretty much the same.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Monty. Thank you for this.